Have you ever noticed that the more peaceful you become, the more uncomfortable certain people seem around you? You stop arguing. You stop chasing approval. You stop reacting to every insult. You focus on your own life. And suddenly, people start treating you differently. Some become distant. Some become critical. Some begin questioning your choices. And others seem strangely irritated by your happiness. Why does this happen? Why would anyone feel threatened by something as harmless as peace? The answer lies deep within human psychology. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering comes from endless desire, comparison, and dissatisfaction. Most people spend their lives chasing something they believe will finally make them happy, yet even when they get it, the feeling rarely lasts. That is why a peaceful person is so powerful. Your peace represents something many people are desperately searching for but cannot find. And sometimes, instead of inspiring them, it threatens them. Here are 7 signs people feel threatened by your peace. The first sign is that they constantly try to disturb your calm. There are people who simply cannot tolerate seeing someone at peace. When you are calm, they create drama. When you are happy, they bring negativity. When you are focused, they create distractions. At first, it may seem accidental, but over time, a pattern begins to emerge. They always seem to appear when things are going well. They bring gossip, they start arguments, they create unnecessary tension. Why? Because your calmness reminds them of something they lack. A person who is internally at war often feels uncomfortable around someone who is internally at peace. Your presence becomes a mirror, and that mirror forces them to see the chaos within themselves. Instead of dealing with their own problems, they try to pull you into theirs. The strange thing is that they may not even realize they're doing it. Human beings naturally seek emotional validation. If they are unhappy, they often feel more comfortable when others are unhappy too. Your peace disrupts that emotional balance, and for some people, that is difficult to accept. The second sign is that they constantly question your happiness. Have you ever shared good news with someone only to receive a strange reaction? Instead of celebrating, they become skeptical. Instead of being happy for you, they ask questions. Are you sure this will last? What if things go wrong? Do not get too excited. Be careful. On the surface, these questions may seem harmless, but sometimes they reveal something deeper. A person who feels threatened by your peace struggles to believe that happiness can be real, especially if they haven't experienced it themselves. Your happiness challenges their worldview. It forces them to confront an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe the life they're living is not the only way. Maybe peace is possible. Maybe contentment is possible. And that realization could create resistance, because accepting it would require them to change. The third sign is that they downplay your growth. One of the most painful experiences in life is realizing that some people were comfortable with the old version of you, the insecure version, the confused version, the version that constantly doubted itself. But when you begin growing, something changes. You become more confident, more disciplined, more emotionally stable. And suddenly, the same people who supported you before start acting differently. They say things like, "You have changed. You take things too seriously now. You think you are better than everyone." But often, your growth is not the real problem. The real problem is that your growth highlights their lack of growth. Schopenhauer understood that comparison is one of the greatest sources of suffering. People do not simply judge themselves, they judge themselves against others. And when someone close to them begins evolving, it can create feelings of inadequacy. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your progress exposes their comfort zone. The fourth sign is that they mock your silence. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. Most people assume that power comes from speaking louder, arguing harder, defending yourself constantly. But truly peaceful people understand something important. Not every attack deserves a response. Not every opinion matters. Not every conflict is worth your energy. This mindset confuses people, especially those who depend on emotional reactions. When they criticize you and receive no reaction, they become frustrated. When they provoke you and receive no response, they become irritated. Your silence removes the power they hoped to gain. This is why some people interpret peace as weakness. They do not understand the discipline required to remain calm when others are trying to provoke you. In reality, silence is often a sign of emotional mastery, and emotional mastery is threatening to those who have not achieved it. The fifth sign is that they become competitive for no reason. One of the strangest things about insecurity is that it creates competition where none exists. You are simply living your life, yet someone suddenly starts comparing themselves to you. They compare achievements, money, relationships, social status, even happiness. Everything becomes a contest. Why? Because your peace creates pressure. Not because you're competing, but because they are measuring themselves against you. A peaceful person does not need constant validation. A peaceful person does not need to prove their worth every day. And that confidence can feel intimidating, especially to people who are still trapped in comparison. Attractions, work, entertainment, social media, constant noise. But a peaceful person is different. A peaceful person has learned to sit with themselves, to face uncomfortable truths, to accept reality, to let go of unnecessary suffering. And that creates a powerful contrast. Your peace silently exposes the emotional storms that others are trying to avoid. This is why some people become uncomfortable around genuinely peaceful individuals. Not because peace is offensive, but because peace reveals what they have not yet found within themselves. And that realization can be difficult to face. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering comes from endless wanting. People believe happiness exists somewhere in the future, after the promotion, after the relationship, after the success, after the next achievement. But the tragedy is that the finish line keeps moving. There is always something else to chase. This is why peace is so rare. Peace does not come from having everything. It comes from no longer believing that everything is necessary. And that mindset is revolutionary. In a world obsessed with more, a peaceful person chooses enough. In a world addicted to noise, a peaceful person chooses silence. In a world driven by comparison, a peaceful person chooses self-acceptance. That is why peace is powerful, and that is why it can make certain people uncomfortable. So if you notice people reacting strangely to your calmness, do not take it personally. Do not shrink yourself. Do not return to chaos to make others comfortable. Continue protecting your peace. Continue growing. Continue choosing self-mastery over emotional reactions. Because the strongest person in the room is not always the loudest, not always the richest, not always the most admired. Sometimes the strongest person is simply the one who has learned to remain at peace while the world around them is falling into chaos. And that kind of peace will always be misunderstood by those who have never experienced it.